Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Empowered Athlete Podcast. In today's episode, this is really exciting because we have a special guest, Miss Laurien Zurhake, and she is going to be bringing an amazing conversation to the table all about creating a trauma-informed, healthy jiu-jitsu environment in the gym. And I'm really excited for you to get to know a little bit more about her journey and basically everything that led her to where she is right now and the mission that she has to bring to the world in this community right now. So a little bit of background before I have her speak is Laurien was born in the Netherlands. She studied history and archaeology in the Netherlands and at Oxford University, which is amazing. She moved to Germany to pursue her PhD on pain behavior. There she met her now husband on the BJJ mats, with whom she has now her own yoga and martial arts academy, which is seriously amazing. I think that they go beautifully together. Having experienced PTSD due to a sexual assault, she started training jiu-jitsu and yoga, and later with her aim to make the martial arts and yoga mats a safer space for all through trauma-informed coaching. And she's created a program that we're going to dive into in this episode of really bringing that mission that she has to fruition to actually make impact and make change in this place, which is why I wanted to bring her on, because it's something that is so incredibly needed. So without further ado, Miss Laurien, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really very excited because we're both actually, working in similar fields. So I'm super excited today.
Yes. And I'd love for you to dive into, just for those who have no idea who you are originally from Germany. I know that there's a lot of people who are in my world, that are all over the world, but mostly in the United States. So we really get to expand our missions together globally, which is amazing. So a little bit about like who you are, what your background is, expanding on the intro that I gave, as well as what motivated you to join jiu-jitsu.
So I'm like born and raised in the Netherlands, traveled kind of also a little bit over Europe for studying archaeological digs in Rome, which were like really awesome. And then, unfortunately, a not so nice experience where I realized that after the sexual assault, I had issues when men would just, of a specific age, would even look at me, even though they had, they didn't want anything from me, but it triggered me. And then, of course, people say, yeah, well, when you want to learn to defend yourself, start a martial art. And my brother at that point was already training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he was like, yeah, why don't you check it out? And I'm very stubborn, and I'm like a person, like when I realize I have a weakness, I want to confront that because I want to make that a strong point. Not that I think that weaknesses are bad, but when it's really limiting kind of my life, which it was, when I don't feel comfortable with men from a specific age around me, it's not a way to live. So I thought, where is an environment where you mostly have only men? Well, martial arts. So true, I wasn't disappointed when I went. I was the only girl. I'm also very small. So, and in Netherlands, people are big, especially there. They were huge, and I may be Dutch, but I do not have those genes, unfortunately, for being tall. Yeah. And they also went for it. So there also was then for me, the first 6 months were in many ways absolute hell, because the coach I had, very knowledgeable about the art, did not understand trauma. So he fed me kind of like to the wolves. And it is still like an age or period in BJ where it was growing, but there were not many women, and especially men did not want to lose from a girl. So they also went for it. So for me, the first 6 months were during sparring, I would say, still re-traumatizing, because as you know, in BJ in the beginning, you're surviving, you're not even defending, you're surviving. Then later you start defending, and then maybe you hit some maybe nice sweep or some offensive stuff. So as I was surviving, I also got flashback at the same time, because of course many positions are similar and can be triggering. So the first 6 months I would just go home all time crying. And even when I also informed the coach, I realized that he then thought, BJ is then not for you. Mm-hmm. Then me being very stubborn, I am like, you cannot tell me, what I can and cannot do. So what actually saved me was me going to Oxford to study there. And they also had a BJ academy there. So the coach there, he was a smaller guy, and he understood also what smaller bodies need, that it's not good when we get like steamrolled. But there the atmosphere was different. He also understood I was new and I just need some basics and a little bit of tender love and care. He didn't speak really much English at that time, being Brazilian, but somehow it worked. There were also a few smaller people there, and there I realized that it can also be different. It
Yeah.
also, because BJ on its own is already really tough and rough and sometimes disheartening. But I realized that I could also train BJ without having all time to fight my flashbacks, to fight my trauma. That actually BJ can be a tool to actually help me with that trauma.
So good.
That idea started there when I realized I started to feel very differently. There I also met then my first yoga teacher, and she founded the Yoga Impact charity, where she offers trauma-informed also teacher trainings, but then was especially offering programs for refugees. So people obviously with, unfortunately, several trauma. So I really met there, I think, the right people that set things in motion. So then when I came back, I finished my master's in the Netherlands and then got accepted at the LMU in university in Munich. And then I moved to Germany. And of course, I wanted to continue with my BJJ career journey, however you want to say it. And that's then also where I met my husband, who was already a black belt in traditional jiu-jitsu. So he already was teaching at a club at that time. And when we became blue belts, we started teaching BJJ there as well. And then he was like, yeah, I want to do it professionally. It was one of his big dreams. And then we were like, why not? So we started and founded our own gym.
So
what will happen.
Such an incredible journey. And I love how the universe just always puts everything in perfect timing. And in the moments, we sometimes don't understand why we're going through something or the experiences that we're having, but we can always look back in retrospect of like, wow, that was all supposed to happen to lead me to this moment. And so that's so beautiful. And I know that you had mentioned a little bit about your initial experience in jiu-jitsu and, how those first 6 months were re-traumatizing. And that's really important, to bring to the table, because that's an experience so many women and, I'd like to believe that men have it as well, although it's not really talked about because, one of the biggest things that is kind of embedded in our mindset, especially as men, when we start the sport, is kind of that hard mentality. Don't show your weakness, don't show your pain. And, that plays into all the genders. But it's important to realize that it's happening with everyone. And that re-traumatization, like you said, which I loved and wanted to just highlight, jiu-jitsu gets to be a tool. And I believe that jiu-jitsu is a vessel for personal development, for personal growth, and for personal healing. And for those who aren't able to adopt that approach, unfortunately, I believe those are the people that usually drop out. Those are the people that usually leave because they're not adapting their mindset to use it as a vessel for growth. And it just really keeps them in this re-traumatized state. And of course, it makes sense they would drop out because we can only tolerate so much re-traumatization before we realize that, this is just too much on me mentally and physically. And that is something I am really on a mission to break, because I believe that everybody should be in martial arts, and specifically jiu-jitsu, because it really is an empowering tool if we can have leaders that can support us in really making it an empowering tool and more than just showing up for jiu-jitsu. And you had mentioned, some of the things you noticed missing in the jiu-jitsu environment. Some of it was like mindset between the instructors and their approach, and getting that little TLC and recognizing that you're a beginner, that you're a smaller female, and then really catering, the jiu-jitsu and switching it and adapting it a little bit to you so that you can feel more safe, feel more comfortable. Those are things that are such important qualities when it comes to being a leader, being an instructor, so that you can keep retention, right? You want to keep the students on the mat. You don't want to just have somebody for a month, do your 30-day free trial and then leave. You want somebody to be in it for life and ultimately, I would think, become a black belt. And in that, it's more than just getting that initial sign up. It's how are you taking care of the person once they sign up so that they can be in it and you can retain that student, and not just from a financial standpoint, but so that you can build a community and, build that team that everybody desires, that, will support you just as much as you support them. And I'm curious to transition a little bit. You mentioned a lot around those little details, but what led you to take official action in creating Off the Zone? So you can also dive into with this, what was the steps leading up to creating Off the Zone, as well as what is Off the Zone, which is your company, but diving into what is it exactly and what is the mission behind this company you created?
So then when we were training, my husband and I in a different school, we left that school due to, again, sexual harassment. So there the black belt used the women as a dating pool. And what happened there was he tried with me as well. I said always no. But then I got punished. And by extension, my then boyfriend as well. So we didn't get graduated fairly anymore. Everything was shit. Everything was, it was, and also because many other women wanted him. I do not know why. It was very toxic. But he would then, for instance, just touch my feet, and then other women would then start bullying me because they thought we had a thing, even though it was, just using me also, even though there was nothing. I didn't want anything apart from instruction. Now, what happened was that, and it was really not easy to leave because you have, apart from him, you have many other students you like. You have like very also, because you roll with each other, you sway with each other. It's like, it's so hard to leave. But what triggered it was that we then indeed already taught BHA to youth and kids at that point in the club of my husband. And they were young people, young ladies also. And once they came over because they got graduated. And somehow I thought, yeah, if they turn 18, or they would not be able to, to withstand that. They're too young to understand this kind of toxic and manipulation. Yeah. Also, because I, for a long time, thought like, why would he even be interested in me, in it being just a white belt or then just like a blue belt, right? And somehow that triggered something in me. I'm like, I have to protect. And that I also thought like, the moment we were out, we realized we should have done this so much sooner, because when you get some distance, then you start to see for what it really is. When you're in a toxic environment, it's so hard to recognize it. And so we left and we then opened a gym, and we were like, no, I want a school that is safe for everybody, regardless of gender, of sexual orientation, race, anything. I want it to be safe. And my friend that I already mentioned, my first yoga teacher, we always remained in touch. And she offered then also trauma-informed training then for yogis. And since we were also yogis, we were like, okay, we do that. And that kind of gave us like a perspective, like how to work on it. And then, of course, we worked further on it, read our studies, study further, and really build our trauma-informed program, which really started to take shape during the pandemic. Because we, as you can imagine, people couldn't train. And for some, that is, or for most, it's a very hard, how do you say this? Hard for their mental health. Yeah, a shock. And also for kids, I mean, we also, the most optimistic kids we have, we realized at one point also they just start to just like stare, because of course everything became online. And that's also that we create all kinds of online trainings, programs for kids and youth and adults, and it went very well. So we actually gained members, whereas most schools were like losing them. So when some other BJ school owners got wind of that, they asked us like, what are you doing? So we explained that a lot is trauma informed, and they started asking questions. And after really many asks, we were like, you know what, we're just going to make a course because it's important, it works. And I thought, I can give somebody a fish, but it's better when I teach them how to fish. And when we get more coaches, more schools that know how to do this, then you really have impact. And that's what we want. And that's how we then start working and we call it Off the Zone.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I love that analogy you use that's been timeless, used time again, of teaching somebody, how to fish so that they can be empowered. And that really, is in line with the mission that I have of really changing the paradigm of what it means to be a high performance athlete. And part of that is really increasing your awareness, increasing your consciousness, and really knowing that you have power to change these paradigms, these toxic environments, whether or not you are the one directly involved. Part of being a leader and part of seeing the change is to notice and be aware of when there are toxic situations. And like, if you don't do anything about it, the truth is you're still an enabler, because the only way to break a cycle is to speak up and to use our voice and to take action. And that can be really, really scary, because a lot of people, they focus on the fear of the repercussions of using their voice, of will I be held back in my belt promotion? Will I be kicked out of the academy? And this fear is deterring people from really taking this action that's really going to have massive impact as a whole and really changing the paradigm that we all desire. But it really starts with everyone taking that individual action and not just sitting back and waiting for the next person to take the action, waiting for that one person to take the action. Really, it comes down to us. And it can be really, really scary because of, like I said, all of those fears that come up. But we have to really assess, is the vision that I have for what I would love and the community I want to be a part of, can I really take an active step and be an active participant in that? Or am I just going to wait around? Because that's really what it comes down to. And I love that people were inquiring, like, what are you doing? What are you doing to have this success during what seems to be, this global pandemic where most businesses are going out of business or losing their memberships and things. And you were able to see an opportunity that not only would, generate income for yourself, but really start shifting the way people are viewing and integrating this new approach, because that's the way the world's going nowadays. People are, as a collective, increasing their consciousness. They're becoming more awake, becoming more aware, and people are speaking out more. And so now more than ever, it is so critical for not only business owners and instructors and coaches to have the knowledge of what it means to have a healthy coaching environment, but also the students and the athletes to realize that they have a role to play as well. They're not just a training partner. They're not just somebody who clocks in, rolls around, and they aren't aware to what's happening in the gym. That type of unconscious behavior isn't really going to empower everyone as a group. And that's kind of what we're here to do, is really empower everybody. And it takes both parties, the coach, the higher ups, the leaders, and everybody who's from white to brown in between, no matter if you're training one time a week or if you're training 6 times a week.
Absolutely. I also think this should be like more rewarding. Like what we noticed is that we have some contact with the people like from the previous gym, but it's always kind of like secretive. Like they do say like, oh, you're doing so well, keep on going. Also, like when we meet on tournaments or so, but they would never dare to really speak out about it. So I know that like under the table, my husband and I were really supported by many, and they stand for what we stand for, but they don't dare to really, really, really stand for it. And I think I know it is so hard to leave a gym, because if they were to leave, then, it's also over for that person, right? But also, you don't want to upset anyone. You also don't want that you then become another victim of, I understand all these fears that one might have. But in the end, I think if you indeed want to create healthier environments, you will have to take a stand. And so I hope that with this and that it's known that people appreciate it, that people appreciate it when somebody also stands up for you, that you're not have to carry it all the time alone, that is worth so much. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
I just got full body chills, because that's so true. One of the things that comes up, I believe, that in regard to keeping it under the table, not really, speaking your voice to the masses, is there's some shame associated with, this new paradigm and changing things. Anytime there's change, there's going to be some judgment from people who don't understand, because that's what judgment comes from. Judgment comes from people just not understanding because they're used to a certain way. And in that judgment or fear of judgment, they're like, well, I'm going to only take a stand to this degree where I still feel safe. But in order to really lead, you have to exit your comfort zone. You have to stand for the masses and really be willing to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. And if you truly have a stand for it, then it needs to be in every facet of your life. This really comes down to, what are the values that you hold? And are your actions really going to reflect the values you hold? Because if your actions don't reflect your values, then are they actually values that you hold?
Yeah, or it's about priorities, right? Because I do believe that for some, I think that most people say like, oh yeah, sexual harassment, or sexual misconduct in the gym, it should not happen. but I guess to stay good friends with that coach, or to to at least not be frowned upon yourself, is more important. So I think it's also like it's this priority thing. That's why I think rewarding, I think is so important. I mean, I get it. I don't, I'm not, I feel no resentment toward that. I get it, but I wish more would stand up, because it's just, it would help so many more. I mean, even when you just specifically go to the sexual harassment, I know every time a guy would speak up or say like, it's bullshit, I don't want this, some guys saying like, yeah, why should I say this? It's this should be normal. Yes, I agree. But when people don't say it, then it doesn't become this new paradigm. Exactly. And not only saying, but also like acting on it. Like it's one of the things in I have the safeguarding PDF for martial arts schools, like 6 chapters to start with. And there I also explained that like you have sexual misconduct may or may not be criminal, but it's still inappropriate. Because sometimes people say like, yeah, but as long as it isn't rape, or as long as it's not criminal, yes, then they think it's okay. And I'm like, what we have to understand is that inappropriate behavior may be criminal, maybe not, but it's still misconduct.
Yeah.
And that's what we sometimes, I think, is also unclear for many people in the sport, that what is like the boundary, what's appropriate and what's not. And not something what starts kind of inappropriate, it can end into something criminal, right? And you want to nip it in the bud when it starts. And that's also with bullying the same. I mean, a lot of bullying is not criminal. It's not, but it can, I mean, so many people, also kids, people, they committed suicide over that, right? So obviously it is something very serious. And just because it's not criminal doesn't mean therefore it should be tolerated in your school.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, people follow what you do, not what you say. So absolutely, you can say all that you want about what you stand for, and if you do or don't agree with certain principles, but if your actions aren't following suit, well, people can only, and I don't blame them, but they can only really follow you for the actions that you're taking, because our actions are really showing what we are willing to commit to and what we're willing to prioritize. So that's so important that we start taking action in small ways. And that's the conversation I want to lead into, is to give people some tangible tips for both the professors, the coaches, and the students, so that they can start feeling empowered to start taking that action. And so my question is, what are some of the 3 biggest tips you would provide to professors and coaches, as well as to students, and how they can become active participants in changing a toxic gym culture and really supporting this new paradigm?
So the 3, I mean, there are many, so I have to think for a moment. So first I would start regarding touch, because BJ is a very, he touches everywhere, but you still need to ask for permission. Like, so when you are a coach, for instance, and you see, you need to adjust the student, right? Because then the technique goes further. It's always advised to ask them for permission. And in doing so, to never approach them from behind, that they can't see, that they can see you approaching. Because when you have somebody, for instance, who has some sort of trauma, just being touched, or when they don't see you, that can already trigger something, right? So I would advise, and also the same for students, when you want to help another student or anything, approach them that they can see you. Make sure that you make contact with them, because asking for permission can be very direct, like, is it okay when I adjust you? Just simple like that. And when they say yes, then you can do it, because also sometimes people don't want. I mean, you also have stubborn people that maybe do not want to learn. That's fine too. But then it's also a boundary. So when they say no, no is no. So that's regarding touch. And it leads me to the second one, which is choice.
Yes.
Choice is basically the main thing, or one of the main things with trauma-informed perspectives, namely that for people with trauma, they have the feeling that their choice was totally taken away from them. Things happened to them and they had no control whatsoever. They couldn't say yes, they couldn't say no, it happened and there was nothing they could do about it. And then you feel so powerless. So in order to empower them, you want to give them choice. So that means that if they do not want to do anything, then they don't. That's fine. If they do not want to roll with you, then do not take that personally, which is the next point. That's okay. You don't know why. Often, and I should address this too, maybe it's like as a 3.5 points. Do not take things so personally, because often it's really not about you. When somebody says no, they can maybe have a shit day.
Mm-hmm.
Or like a very simple example, there were like two guys. I loved rolling with them, but twice a year they had a bad day. And that day they would smash everybody. So when I saw they came in and they had like a bad day and they asked me to roll, I said no, simply because I know that they were not in the right mindset to roll with somebody smaller. Does it mean I didn't like them? No, not at all. But I also realized that one, my body cannot give them what they need. I couldn't, I cannot. I lack the power and the weight. But that is the thing. So for both men, women, children, like if you do not want something, whether it's rolling or something else, that is okay. Because usually people, especially for BJ, they come there for fun. So if they really do not want something, they will have a reason. It doesn't mean you're a bad coach, doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad training partner. Accept it first. That's like the first step. And that was kind of like part of like, of choice. And then the last would be always train the person in front of you. If also like train, that means you as a coach and you as a training partner, because every person has a different window of tolerance, and that can also change per day. So some people you can really like, you can stress them, you can provoke them a little bit. That's fine. But for other people, that's too much.
Yeah.
So if you are, if you are like, I'm small, if I go also with against another smaller, even smaller than me, then I'm not going to be like, finally I'm the big one. No, I want to have a technical, nice role. So that also means when I go with bigger people that I understand how hard it is for them they have to also like juggle it. They cannot pressure me too much because I'm so much smaller. They want to do it, be as technical as possible. So for them, it's also hard to rule for me. So understand whom you're rolling with and who you're training with. I think that is like very important, especially for the coach. The coach should know that. So when you have somebody, when the coach sees like, somebody comes in, you can see like, it's a new person. Well, don't pair them up with those guys that have a lot of ego and really want to go for it. Like it makes absolutely no sense because that person most likely won't come back. Pair them up with somebody who remembers how it was like to start, and get them a feel the nice experience of BJ, because BJ is great. And when you start doing these things, then you already create a much safer environment and people like coming back.
I love it.
So touch, choice, and with choice, then don't take things so personally. And 3 is always train the person or with the person in front of you.
I love those tips. And that goes so in line with a lot of what I teach on my side of the world as well, where, permission is such a big thing. And one of the beautiful things about these tips is that they really are simple.
Yep.
And that's really important when it comes to initiating change and taking action, is realizing that it doesn't have to be complicated. It's just simple. It's changing your language. Communication is so incredibly important. And choice and permission-based language is so important. So much of what we're doing in jiu-jitsu is, starting to come back into our bodies, have a relationship with our body again. Really trauma history or not, so many people when they join just are out of touch with their bodies, and jiu-jitsu forces us to learn body awareness, spatial awareness, know our limits of where our flexibility is, where our strength is, where our weaknesses are. It really helps us develop this relationship with our body. And then oftentimes some other things get uncovered that we weren't expecting, which could be those demons of the small or big T traumas from our past, start to resurface. And just something as simple as choice, which is so incredibly important. I totally am on the same page with you as, asking, is it okay if I give you support and, adjust your position here? Something as simple as that. And then also honoring the hell out of that person if they say no. Similar to like what you said of don't take it personally. And the other note to that is they also don't have to give you a reason. And that's something I really wanted to point out, because so many of us, and with women that I've coached over the years, they feel that there needs to be a justification for their no. Like, no, and this is why. And really, I just want to, this is hard. I know that this is hard. I know it's easy, but it's simple, but it's not easy, that you just have to say no. But there's like this deep embedded kind of attachment to this no, where we also feel that we have to justify our no, or we can't say no. It really gets to be simple, and we get to say no and leave it at that. And if somebody can't honor that, if somebody can't just respect that, then that's where the evaluation of, is this a positive environment that's supporting me in my well-being and in my performance, because that's a huge mission of mine, is to realize that in our pursuit of becoming better athletes and in performing and reaching all of the goals that we have, that it can't be at the expense of our mental, emotional, physical health and well-being. Nope. And so when we notice these actions, if it's important to trust our gut, trust our intuition. When we have these moments where we're like, that doesn't sit well with me, or there's this actual visceral sensation that's like a contraction or a feeling, we actually get to trust that, not doubt it. Yep. Trust that and realize that just because somebody's a black belt doesn't mean that they have autonomy over you. It doesn't mean that they have power over you. They are they're just in a different position, but it doesn't mean that they own you in every other aspect of life.
No, I mean, like, that's just knowledge, right? I mean, my husband and I, we were blue belts when we opened our gym, and we were scared as hell. I'll tell you, we really were, because we were like, oh shit, but it was like a principle thing. Like we wanted to keep people safe, and we we're like, we cannot coexist in a gym where, it's toxic. So, but what we noticed was that when we went to competition, our students were doing just as fine as the students of black belts. Yeah. And that's how it started to shift our beliefs, because we had limited beliefs when we started, 100%. Yeah. But then it started to shift because we realized it doesn't really matter. And then also a black belt once came over, and he also said to us, like, hey, when people start, it doesn't matter whether they would learn from you or from me as a black belt. That really doesn't matter. So what is important is that, yes, skill is important. You need to know, obviously, what you're doing. But if you don't know how to pass that on in an appropriate and efficient way, then it won't matter. I mean, I heard enough stories of people who took a private class from a world champion who was really, really good in the art, obviously, but is not really a coach. They said, like, yeah, I wasted my money. I could have gone probably to maybe a purple belt who may not be a world-class athlete, but he or she knows really how to teach. And I think that's what's a bit missing. I think what I also realized in the pandemic, what they also asked me is like, oh, Laurien, how did you get new members? And I realized that they know the art, but they're not necessarily entrepreneurs. They started teaching because they're good in a martial art. So they thought, okay, cool, let's start a school. But then there's always, of course, the entrepreneur, the business side of it. And that was missing. And I think with that, sometimes also about how to teach, like, how do you bring it over? Because you have people that learn who very visually, who listen well, who needs to make notes. There are all kinds of different people. So also when we teach, I try to really get all of them in. There are also people that learn best when they feel it, when they do it. So usually then I take these people as my dummy to show it on, because then they can already feel it. So like this, I incorporate as much as possible, so I know that they understand it from the first onset already. And then of course you go and you help and you adjust. But I know that more of my students are with me, because usually we tend to teach in a way how we learn. So I'm very visual. So usually I would then also teach in such a way because it benefits me. But it doesn't benefit everyone. So I have to take that into account as well. And that's also part of being trauma-informed, because you understand also there are different thinking types. For instance, the what if people, usually they're hated upon. Like, yeah, but what if this? What if that? But what is important to understand is that for them, if they don't get an answer to the question, they cannot continue. Mm-hmm. So like an example I liked was that when somebody was, a friend of mine went to just a theater to play, and she told her mom that she went to the play. And instead of the mom asking, how was it? She's like, how did you get tickets? But before that was answered, she couldn't continue. And we have to somehow, I think, be a bit more forgiving for what ifers, because in the end, they usually do make us think about things that we normally wouldn't think, also about a technique. So I think
it does benefit us all in the end anyway.
Absolutely. But if we are immediately have a bit like, oh, there they go again, right? You do not create it's not everybody's welcome then, obviously. They don't welcome, right? And I think that's what you want, is that they feel safe. And also what you touched upon earlier, which I found so great, with these little things like with choice, or can I adjust you? Just by asking that, you create a safe space. Just by that, you create safe. That's where safety starts. And also for the person with trauma, when they feel safe, they activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's when they can start healing, because when they keep in the fight and flight, they cannot heal.
100%.
So that's like what
So good, so good, so good. So I would love to, we talked a lot about giving people practical tips. And so if people want to go a step further to really educate themselves and really immerse themselves in creating that culture, I would love for you to expand. You mentioned a little earlier, but what are the details of your trauma-informed teacher training program? Like, how does it work briefly, so that people who, do desire to take it to the next level know exactly where to go?
Right. So the fun thing is, when you air it, this one we just opened for then the second launch. Thrive Drive, it's called, and it's based on 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is stability. So we want from, when you feel, but when I don't understand something, when I feel ignorant, I feel insecure. So we work first on stability. So that is 2 weeks. And we just work on what is trauma? How does it manifest itself? How can you recognize it? Just like to get also in the neurobiology, that we really get a good knowledge of what trauma is and what it does. Then the second pillar is discovery. And this is what I imagine also what you do in your courses, and what makes our course different from just reading a book about trauma. That's pillar about discovery. Because if you just have the knowledge, like when you have a black belt, you have the knowledge. If you do not know how to pass it on, it's not going to be very useful. So that also means that we have to be the change we want to see. So there we dive into self-limiting beliefs, stories, because we tell stories to ourselves when we don't believe we are worthy or good enough. That is also the vibe that our students or our training partners will pick up, and some will be more forgiving than others with that. So we learn, like also as a coach, if I don't believe in myself, like how can I be there for my students? So that's also a lot about that. We learn what kind of limiting beliefs people with trauma, but also people without trauma may have when they enter a gym. And we learn how can you shift these beliefs into positive beliefs that helps them grow. But it starts, of course, first with yourself. So it's also really an inside job. I will say that you have to look at yourself. And then pillar 3 is called strategy. And that's then where we really go into the practical side, safeguarding measures, very practical ones like these that we just discussed. And also not really techniques, because that people know, but games that you can step by step widen the window of tolerance of your people, especially also when you want to offer specific women's self-defense courses or for kids. These are games that people get in touch. As you say, people often with trauma, they lost this mind-body connection. And these are very simple, but very not very invasive games. And you step it up step by step. So then we really get many ideas how to do it, but also how to kind of overwhelm the system and teach them how to calm down again, or whether they can still think when aroused. And we don't do this by hitting them in the face, but we ask them things. So they have to, for instance, I don't know, punch a kick pad as long as hard as they can. And the one holding it is giving them mathematical equations. Well, when you're aroused, it's hard to think. And this is the way how we can reproduce kind of like the overwhelm without really becoming, well, by re-traumatizing, because of course we do not want that, but you can replay that. And there they get they learn to deal better with stress and to still be able to think while stressed. Because usually when we get into fight flight, our rational brain goes offline and our reptilian limbic systems take over. And what we usually want to train is that they can go up, but they can still keep their rational brain online. And after it's gone, to also let it go.
So incredibly amazing.
So yeah,
I love this.
So yeah, it's 6 weeks. And so the practical thing is you have every week 60 to 90 minutes, more as a lecture, but it was like from what I did last time, and we just recorded it. And then we have every week a group call where we, go a bit deeper with case studies. They can ask questions, because I'm sure they also had all kinds of experience, not necessarily personal ones, but things that, good case studies to discuss, to go a bit deeper into it. And yeah, that's how we roll.
I love it. And this really is just so beautifully meshed with the program that I run. And I want to just clarify for those listening that this program is really for, she focuses on these teachers and coaches. So if you're a teacher or a coach or instructor, whatever you identify as far as a leader within your gym, you know, this is an amazing program to really empower yourself and gain that knowledge and have the actual tools too, where it's more than knowledge. It's like the integration and the embodiment as well, because like she said, in order to lead other people, you got to lead yourself. You have to understand yourself. You have to learn how to stabilize yourself in order to do any of that with other people. And then this literally meshes perfectly with my program, the Empowered Athlete Academy. This is a 6-month trauma-informed container, and it's really funny. The first 2 you call stability and discovery, because that's literally the first 2 phases of my program. So the first, we also go through 3 phases in the Empowered Athlete Academy over 6 months. We focus on 2 months for each phase. The first is connection. So I call that one connection. That includes stability, it includes safety, it includes grounding, autonomy, permission. And then we have rediscovery, which is everything that you mentioned. It's really going deep into understanding our internal landscape, our belief systems, our traumas, our, you know, shadow work, inner child healing, because it's so important to address that within ourselves. But we can't do that, like you mentioned, from a place of instability. We have to feel safe and grounded in our own system in order to go deeper, to unpack the layers. So that's kind of the intention behind that. And then we dive into reignition, because this program is really for the athlete. This program is for the athlete, not necessarily for the instructor. This is for empowerment on the other side of it. The athlete who has perhaps a lot of big T or small t trauma that really just wants to embark on a healing, personal development, spiritual development journey, to empower them while doing jujitsu. And reignition is all about really turning on your intuition, really learning how to set strong boundaries within yourself, really be able to take action from your desires, create the life that you want, and really be in your queen energy and be able to navigate. And like I said earlier, like set boundaries, say no without having to explain yourself. You know, if somebody invites you to an open mat and it's your rest day, being able to say no without guilt, because that's what your body needs. You know, so these programs are amazing. I highly encourage you to check out both of them. I will put the information in the description of the podcast for the teacher training, where to connect with Miss Laurien on, and I'll let her speak a little bit on how you can connect and learn more and just be in her community, be in her world. So do you want to go ahead and, you know, what's the best way for people to connect and communicate with you?
So of course we're on Instagram. So Instagram, we have like off-the-zone. You'll find us. I think that's the best for Off the Zone. Our gym is called Team Laurien and Alex. This is a name from me and my husband. So there, it's just written all next to each other. You can find us there as well. We've of course also Off the Zone website, also with dashes. It's the same. So I think it should be rather straightforward. I think one thing I still would like to mention, which I think is very important, that what we do is like also complementing with professional help. Like I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, and that's not what I do. I think it's very important because sometimes make it blurry, but actually it's not. So what a therapist or a professional mental health care provider does is that they work with you with the past as it is in the present. And we more as coaches go from the present more towards the future. Mm-hmm. And just to try something that is like a long story short, in our brains, when we have trauma, we want to create a new narrative that can be through actually writing, can be through martial arts, is what we do, or through yoga or breathing, anything. And once you create this new narrative, you want to connect it back to your trauma, so that when you get a trigger, the amygdala, so the threat center, or more like fear response center, I would say, gets then, normally if it gets a trigger, it will go into a negative response, which would be a flashback, you freeze, you shake, anything like, or you get very aggressive. But when you create a new positive narrative, then when you get a similar trigger, it can have a rewarding outcome. And that's what BJ can do so well. So, and that's kind of like what these kind of coaching programs do. They help you to create this new narrative that you can connect back. So it doesn't erase the trauma, but it's like, despite that, you
Yes.
still do this and this and this and that. And that's, I think, what's really important, just to clarify that bit.
100%. Yeah, this is not in place of therapy or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but simply just, something that can be very, very helpful in addition to. So that's definitely an amazing point to make. And this has been such an empowering and enlightening conversation. It's been so amazing to listen to your journey and to see you in your different levels of leadership, where you perhaps, way back when felt like you were a victim at one point, and then really were able to shift out of that victimhood to really see, how can I start to make change that not only supports myself and my growth and my healing, but also now expanding to a bigger mission to support others. And that really lights my soul on fire, because I believe that we all get to empower each other. And it's through our experiences where we can do that, and sharing our story and sharing our voice. So it's been an absolute pleasure. And when it comes to everyone listening to this episode, I would love if you could share this with teammates, friends, family. Again, we're trying to spread our mission and spread this information, this conversation to the masses, as many people as possible. And we all have a voice. So one way that we can start is by sharing this with other people. Post it on your social media, tag us. We want to reshare. We want to celebrate with you and taking this step that can seem very scary, but really is going to be just absolutely rewarding for not just you, but the world in this sport. And so that's my invitation. Again, everything to contact Miss Laurien will be in the podcast notes below. And if you have any questions about EAA, the Empowered Athlete Academy, or her program, or you just want to connect and get to know and have this get to be in this conversation even more, you can follow us on social media. Again, all those links will be in the podcast description. It's been such an honor.
Thank you so much.
And lastly, what I will say is that we do plan on hosting a masterclass. The details will be released in the upcoming months, but we just want you to know, be on the lookout, keep your eyes peeled for a masterclass that we're going to be hosting. And we're going to be diving into more practical things when it comes to being an active participant in rewriting this paradigm, in supporting and creating a healthy environment as a student and a coach. And this masterclass is going to be badass. It's going to be epic. So be on the lookout, because we will be posting and, talking and spreading the message when those details unveil. And you're getting the first sneak peek of the topics that we will be discussing. So thank you. And the last thing I would love to ask is a little fun fact to end this note. Putting you on the spot here, what is your favorite submission?
My favorite submission. So I think it must be the crucifix. It's actually kind of a funny story.
Oh.
So I was not the one doing it, but there was in the Netherlands once a Brazilian Jesus guy. His name was Jesus, and he also had like this big Jesus Christ tattoo on his back. And then there was his Dutch. I mean, Dutch people will usually everybody thinks we're rude and all that. Maybe we are. I don't know. But anyway, he saw that and he was in his bracket and he was like, I have to crucifix him, and he did. And somehow I was like, I don't know, the irony was just too big. So I think after that, it's not that I hate it ultra often, but I just like the story. So I'm like, I would say I would go for the crucifix at this point.
I love that. That's such a fun one. It's not really usually people's favorite, so I love that it's different. Awesome. I had to put it out there for the jiu-jitsu listeners that are always like, "Ooh, what's their submission?" So thank you so much. And without further ado, we will see you in the next episode. Again, share this episode with others to spread this mission, spread this conversation, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Bye.